you experience a symptom, let's just say it's a massive headache, stomp your foot, throw out your hands, and say no. And so I did this, and it only took me a few days of doing that I could just say it in my head and I didn't have to look silly, and then I didn't have any more symptoms.
I met our next guest, Sandy Martin, at her inaugural biohacking conference titled Biohacker Expo in Miami last year. I met some of the people you've actually heard on this podcast at that Biohacker Expo, people like Ben Azadi and Robert Lufkin. For over 15 years, Sandy has been heavily involved in organizing Comic-Con events. She is here to share her story and the knowledge she has gained on her journey, which includes interacting with, hiring, and learning from some of the top biohackers on the planet.
He told me the best thing I could do to heal was to not experience symptoms. And he recommended a training program, neuro-limbic rewiring program. And with this program, I would learn how to cut out my symptoms and not acknowledge them. So I took the program, and I'm going to tell your viewers right now exactly what to do.
Hi, my name is Chris Burris. I'm a longevity expert and the chief scientist at a lab focused on a longevity molecule. My primary focus is to help people live longer and better lives with science. Make sure to subscribe and share so you and your friends can live longer and better. Well, actually, so you and your friends can live beyond the norms. Hi, and welcome to the Live Beyond the Norms Health and Longevity podcast. I met our next guest, Sandy Martin, at her inaugural biohacking conference titled Biohacker Expo in Miami last year. The event was amazing, and it was the first biohacking event I ever went to. I met some of the people you've actually heard on this podcast at that Biohacker Expo, people like Ben Azadi and Robert Lufkin. I remember being at her event and having a conversation with one of the booths, and William Shatner just went down the aisle past us. That particular person at that booth that I was chatting with was younger, and I don't think she fully appreciated when I said, "Oh my God, William Shatner just went past us." If you have ever heard of Comic-Con, for over 15 years, Sandy has been heavily involved in organizing Comic-Con events. She is here to share her story and the knowledge she has gained on her journey, which includes interacting with, hiring, and learning from some of the top biohackers on the planet. Sandy, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks so much, Chris. I'm really, truly happy to be here.
Very cool. So I heard you say on Ben Azadi's podcast that you are a spreadsheet girl, that spreadsheets are your jam. Based on your skill set to put together these amazing conferences, you are clearly extremely organized. Before we get focused on health and biohacking, I want to go a little deeper, maybe a lot further back, and talk about young Sandy. Like, where did you grow up? What was family life like? And if you could pinpoint something or someone that might hint that you would go down the path of being an entrepreneur, organizing events, or maybe even that you would end up on the cover of Top Doctor magazine, who or what might that be?
Well, I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky. And you have to say Louisville. All of the vowels have to fall out of your mouth when you say it, just making sure your audience is aware. These are important things. I actually just moved back right after my event last year. I moved back to Louisville 2 blocks away from the Montessori school where I grew up.
Wow.
And so I started Montessori school when I was 2.5, and I was there until I was 12. And that was the most impactful thing in my childhood. And not just because of the nature of how a child gets to explore their own curiosities. I mean, that's truly shaped me as a person. But the story of Maria Montessori, Dr. Maria Montessori, the first female doctor in Italy, who was not allowed to be in the cadaver room with her other medical students because they were all men and those were naked bodies. And she wasn't allowed to be present with a naked body in front of men. So she had to do her studies by herself with cadavers. And That's like how extreme, like just knowing how hard she fought to be able to do what she did is a story that has shaped my life. And, in that time, it would have been common for a woman to become a teacher, and that wasn't her path. She went to medical school, but the way that she studied medicine, she applied that to how children were behaving. And when she was asked to help out, she ended up bringing a perspective that has changed the world. And I like to think sometimes that if she could create a worldwide movement starting in the late 1800s, then perhaps I could do the same today.
Very cool. Any indication that you would end up in the path of, well, one, organizing events? I feel like that's a unique skill set or set, or was that just kind of exploration of what you wanted to try to do along the Montessori lines? And then also kind of getting into the biohacking space, any indications early on?
I always liked media, and I got involved in media before I got involved in events. I liked the idea of gathering, but I had no expertise there and no starting point at all. I owe my experience in events completely to my ex-husband. Mike had started Florida SuperCon in 2006, I believe. And I met him in 2007. And we started dating and working together, got married, and we ran Florida SuperCon together and created GalaxyCon together and traveled all over the world, helping people run Comic-Cons and starting our own across the country. I was the operational guru behind SuperCon and GalaxyCon up until I had mold in my brain. And there's a documentary about me doing it called Surviving SuperCon, if anyone's really curious. It was a lot of work. The nature of me and my brain, and I don't know, nowadays we see a lot of ADHD on TikTok, and what is hyperfocus and how can we juggle all these things at once? I probably had some of that. But I literally could hold like 1,000 things in my head during a weekend to make sure everything went off without a hitch. And I was just good at it. I don't know. I lived off of fear and adrenaline, and I was burning out, but I loved it. I just loved that ability to make it happen. I'm not really into comics. I'm not into that side of pop culture. But the event running part of it scares the shit out of me to this day. And it's harder when you're running an event with 60,000 attendees. I mean, that's really hard. And then you're dealing with security and local cops and all that's the subject of the documentary, which is really interesting for anyone who's curious. But it was never really, I was expending all of that energy and effort towards my now ex-husband's passions and not my own passions. And I was really interested in health, but I was following all of the guidelines. And so, if you're following all the guidelines to be healthy, you're not going to be healthy.
Yeah.
All these people really trying super hard to be healthy and failing because they look at the food pyramid. They hear that you can exercise your way out of a bad diet. They hear, you can, there's so many things. I was eating oatmeal and I thought it was healthy.
So in the middle of all this stress, right, of SuperCons and I don't know where SuperCons fit, like we hear Comic-Con, where does SuperCons fit in there? Maybe there's a whole collection of events and like, where does that fit? Like what what might you describe as the kind of pinnacle? And then how did that ultimately fall off?
So almost all, it's not so much now, they've been gobbled up by larger companies, SuperCon included. But independent operators, typically it was like a guy who had run a comic shop for a while, started an event, and then it grew. So in 2007, when the Iron Man movie came out, these little shows that were basically started by small entrepreneurs who had a retail store started to take off. And my ex-husband kind of fit in that category, although he had run larger businesses since his comic shop days. We were primed when he started in 2006, social media was hitting the scene and you could just gobble eyeballs. I was running ads to target William Shatner fans on Facebook and getting a penny a click back in 2009. So it was a great time to start this kind of a business, but most markets had independent operators. And what you would think of as Comic-Con is really just San Diego Comic-Con, which is just one event. And then New York Comic-Con didn't start until 2006 or 7. And so it's the Comic-Con idea feels ever present, but it's kind of like Kleenex, right? Like
Yeah.
it's a name brand, but there's all kinds of brands of tissues out there.
Yeah.
But they've been gobbled up. We sold Florida SuperCon in 2019 and then created GalaxyCon that year. And that was great. Life was good. We had money. We were expanding. We were getting to try things we'd never tried before.
What was the difference between, so you sold it, you exited it, so right around pandemic, was that pandemic related? And then GalaxyCon, what was that kind of migration focused on?
We sold it because we could, and that was awesome.
Smart.
You know, if anyone out there is wondering whether or not they should take money for a business, I highly recommend it. It's loads of fun. Because you gain some freedom. I mean, we were running on thin margins as a couple in a mom and pop business that, you know, we just put everything we had into the company, and to be able to take some out was awesome. So we did that in early 2019, had nothing to do with the pandemic. But we had an event February 28th to March 1st, ironically, in 2020. So the dates of my event this year. And that's when everybody used all the hand sanitizer for the first time. Mm. And there were these like rumblings, and everyone at that event had the flu. We all went home sick, tested. We flu, okay, good. We're not going to die. No one I knew was in this world of, I'm strong enough, I can fight this. Mm. I was terrified. I had no idea. My dad had been living in our place to watch our cats while we were at that event, and he stuck around a while because of COVID, and then he got stuck for 2 months because we were afraid to fly. We were afraid to drive him to Kentucky. We were just afraid. He was watching MSNBC all day long, and we were just scared.
Yeah.
And it's ridiculous how I look back, how indoctrinated I was, but I wasn't in this world. I did not know the word biohacking. I had never heard the word functional medicine. It was all completely foreign to me. And then we had to refund $400,000 in tickets for GalaxyCon Raleigh, which was to happen that summer. And we started out just hosting free live streams with celebrities, just during the 2 weeks of everybody has to slow down. People were stir crazy. And so Lou Ferrigno jumps on a podcast with us. And, you know, we got, different people to talk online about anything. And that was fun. And so Mike, my ex-husband, he's just pure genius. He's like, we're going to sell autographs and mail them to people. And, he's like, we're going to find a way to do meet and greets. And we built a whole system for 2-minute, one-to-one video chats. There was a queue. You could push people through. William Shatner was selling them for like $250 each for 2 minutes. Wow. Yeah. And then so we would put somebody together just like this, but it was timed, and then they'd go, send them an autograph that was personalized to them. And it was awesome. But so we did that without real technology for managing it. We started it kind of in a hodgepodge, like barely strung together kind of a way. And then in September of 2020, I converted it all to e-commerce because I was the brains behind the operation that made shit work. And then in October, I couldn't run the reports on the systems I had set up in September. And that's when I knew I was screwed. I didn't know what was wrong with me.
It wasn't technology. It was you, right? It wasn't the technology. Yeah,
I couldn't read the spreadsheets. I couldn't walk through the steps. Right. I couldn't run through the sequence of steps it took to make sure that a customer got the autograph that William Shatner signed. So William Shatner says to Chris, writes a quote, and then we ship it in the mail to you. Right? Like it was a complex process, and we've spent a lot of time and care making sure people got what they specifically wanted. And I couldn't run that report. I couldn't piece it together. And when I sat in front of my screen for like an hour, not comprehending the system I built, I did it. And I couldn't read it. And I was like, I've heard that people sometimes can't read spreadsheets. Okay, maybe this is what that feels like. And I was frustrated, and I started to feel depressed and confused, and I couldn't work through a sequence at all, a to-do list included. Every single thing I did had like 100 options around it. I could examine anything in the present moment, but it's like a hub and spokes. I have to consider every factor relating to that thing before I can move on to the next thing. There was no true sequence in my life.
Like the antithesis of running an event, right? Like where
Yeah.
you just described like 1,000 things. Like I know this vendor needs food or whatever, or coffee or like whatever it is. Now you're just struggling to go from point A to point B.
Right, right. And so I went to a neurologist. And the neurologist said I had a traumatic brain injury. And so we did a SPECT scan. When I took a few days off, I figured when this happened, I was like, oh, I must have overdone it in September, right? Like I really, really did. So let me just take a couple days off and I'll reset. I watched a bunch of YouTube videos, and I liked Tom Bilyeu, and I found some health videos that he did. And he asked Lisa Feldman Barrett on a video back then what she would do if her daughter said she was depressed. And she said, well, I would have her mitochondria checked. And I was like, what? And I was like, what's that? How do you do that? Today, even to this day, that's not a really viable thing people can do. I don't know exactly what she meant. It's not easy to test for mitochondria and mitochondrial health, but there are offshoots and things we can assume we could test for inflammation and other things. But I thought, oh, well, that's interesting. Is it possible that depression is something other than what I think it is? Because I loved my life, and feeling depressed while I loved my life didn't seem to make sense to me. And so I just kept digging in, and I found Dr. Amen and Dr. Hyman, and really got to understand there's this whole world out there beyond what I had been exposed to. So I started doing things to try to help my brain, and I started with a paleo diet. I went to keto, intermittent fasting keto, and I was trying to exercise, but it was wearing me out. It was weird. Like when I would exercise, my heart rate would go up when I stopped and not down. And that's a symptom of POTS. And I didn't know that. But so I figured out new ways to exercise. Like I would bounce on a trampoline, and my goal would be to lower my heart rate. So I was just following my intuition, just trying to find something that would make me feel better. But I wasn't getting better. So the doctor who sent me for my SPECT scan locally, because again, I was afraid of COVID and I was afraid to get on an airplane. And so I didn't go to Atlanta for Dr. Amen's scan, which I should have done. The local guy sent me to a clinic that performed the scan incorrectly to diagnose me properly. So I took the Dr. Amen brain certification course to learn how to read my scans because I had so much trouble with that doctor. And I was lying down in a room with my eyes closed for 15 minutes before they injected the tracer. So that tracer takes a snapshot of your brain in that moment. It kind of freeze frames, and they put you in the scanner and they can take a picture. So meditating, frontal lobe goes quiet, eyes closed, vision center goes quiet. So it looked like I had had a traumatic brain injury because it's just measuring where activity is going in the brain. And I quieted both because I was bored.
Yeah.
I was bored in that room, that dark room by myself.
How dare you?
Right.
Didn't you want a good result?
Right. Like nobody knew. They didn't know how to even perform the test. So I was misdiagnosed with a traumatic brain injury. And that doctor recommended I take a stroke drug called nimodipine. And he recommended 80 sessions of hyperbaric, which was 20 grand.
Wow.
Neurofeedback, which was about 2,500, and this drug. When I went to the hyperbaric clinic, the doctor there asked me what protocol was recommended for my situation. And when I told him, he said, "Oh, Dr. So-and-so?" I said, "Well, how do you know that?" And he said, "Well, he's the only one that recommends that drug." And so I like to say that this is when I learned that biohacking starts with no. I didn't even know the word biohacking yet. But for me, it's all about no. We can do all kinds of cool things, but if we don't stop the things that are harmful, we can't do anything with biohacking technologies. And so that's kind of how I got onto this path.
So this is actually terrifying that you take a test, they do the test wrong, right? Traumatic brain injury. I have to assume there was something you're like, oh, maybe it was this one time that I bonked something, or you're trying to justify it because that's the natural instinct.
Right.
And then you actually have to go in and get a brain certification so that you understand like, oh, wow, they did it all wrong. And was it when you really landed on they did this wrong that you really started, oh, I got to question everything at this point?
Yes.
Yeah. Of the things, the protocols, the hyperbaric chambers, I've heard nothing but good things, haven't really experienced them. I imagine that was actually a good thing that they actually did prescribe for you. Would you say that was true now, or would that have been a bad thing actually?
So the doctor at the clinic actually believed that their 2.0 ATA hard shell chambers with pure oxygen on site could do more damage to my brain than that could help. He recommended an at-home mild chamber if I was to do anything at all. And so I'd been doing the research, and I didn't want to do a 1.4 ATA chamber because I wanted to do the best that you could get for home, and I was just desperate. So I bought a 1.5 hard shell chamber for my house. And that's part of how I got to $97,000 in my first year biohacking. And actually, it wouldn't fit in the house. We had to take it to the office. And that was $27,000. And it didn't help. It hurt. It actually physically hurt my head because mold fights back. And so if you go at it too hard and it starts to feel like it's under threat, it kicks off a response that we call the Herx response, that it's flooding your body with more inflammation to make you stop. Like there's an intelligence to fungus and mold, and it doesn't care if we're alive or dead. It intends to live.
It sounds like it's hormetic response, right? Like, hey, I'm under this stress, and the right way is to, right? Like we build muscles, it builds more fungus, and then now you're having even more problems. Did that guy at the hyperbaric chamber, did he kind of suspect mold? Why did he think that it would cause more damage? Like
we didn't know yet.
Okay.
All we had was traumatic brain injury.
And
it
so
took me another 4 months to find out it was mold.
So he didn't suspect that. He just suspected that even if you had a traumatic brain injury, hyperbaric chambers wouldn't have been good for you, which had been prescribed to you.
Right.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
This is a little bit crazy. Okay, so now you start going down a whole bunch of different other paths. What does that start to look like?
Oh my goodness. So I also bought a light therapy device from V-Light. Really cool device, puts near infrared light in the brain, pulses it at either 10 hertz or 40 hertz. And that was pretty cool. I don't feel like it helped me until after I was able to detox, but I believe it helps at that point. I bought a sauna. So these are like really expensive items. I'm just trying, but I had this weird feeling in the sauna, and it turns out that my intuition has been spot on all along. So when I was in the sauna, I was like, this is icky. I didn't understand why I felt icky in it. I thought maybe it was just the heat and the sweat, and maybe I wasn't into that. Turns out if you're detoxing mold, the last thing you want to be in is a wooden structure that's enclosed where you're breathing back in what you're sweating out. And so these portable units like Therasage has, where your head sticks out, the ugly little things that you put in a corner somewhere in your house, that's perfect for detoxing mold because you're not breathing it in. Your head's out. I didn't know that. I didn't know what I was detoxing. I thought I was just biohacking at this point, right? So then I'm taking all these supplements to support mitochondrial health. And I wasn't even taking binders. I think I did take some activated charcoal after I found out who Dave Asprey was. But not regularly. But it wasn't until I got to his second book that I got his story about mold and how Dr. Amen figured it out. And then I was able to recognize that I had a scan like what he described in his scans. And then because of what he recommended, I was able to find somebody who would test me for mold. But it took me a month after finding out I should be able to test for it to actually get tested for it. And then another 2 weeks to get those results.
Wow.
It was a real struggle. And one of the weird things that happened along the way, because people were grasping at straws at what it could have been to make me sick. A friend said, it could be arsenic poisoning. And I was like, where would I get arsenic poisoning? He's like, it happens. So like
you start side-eyeing your now ex, right? You're like,
yeah, right.
Maybe it's here.
This was literally the hardest point of the story for him because I had a crab cake. So let's just say it's a Wednesday. I have a crab cake, and then Thursday night I take activated charcoal, and then Friday morning I pee in a cup and send it off to the lab. So the activated charcoal took all of this arsenic that was in crab cakes. Apparently crabs are loaded with arsenic, and it's not a toxic arsenic. It won't hurt you, but I'm not inclined to eat crab anymore. So I peed all of it out because of the charcoal in my first morning pee, send it off. The lab technician between me and the company that sells the tests, the lab technician called me on the phone and said, I'm not supposed to call you.
This is not how a good conversation actually is supposed to start.
Yeah. You have so much arsenic in your body, you might just die.
Yeah, I'm less inclined to eat crab cakes now also.
And so you've heard of the placebo effect, where if you think good things happen. The nocebo effect is when you think you might die, you could actually die. Yeah. There are real stories of people dying from the belief that they're going to die. So I got off the phone with her. We couldn't even get the results. My ex went, everybody's like, how does she have so much arsenic? She might die. He reaches the head of the company, pushes the results through, gets a piece of paper within 2 hours, and then I'm off to a clinic to get chelated. And they took my blood as a backup, and then turns out no arsenic. It was just a crab cake. And so I understand why the world wants to think biohackers are just a bunch of hypochondriac quacks, right? It's real easy to get off course, but it's also real easy to get misdiagnosed from the medical institutions.
Yeah.
So people have got to be confused.
Hey, super quick break from the podcast. Hopefully you're loving it. This is a way you can support the podcast and take advantage of a great offer. We're offering 50% off of one of our MCT bottles. MCT is an amazing oil. Add the ESS60 molecule to it. It's even more amazing. All you got to do is leave a review on iTunes. Send us a notification that you've left that review. We'll get you a coupon code. That'll get you 50% off of our MCT oil and free shipping. Back to the podcast.
So as I was putting this together, one of the things that really became clear to me is that you have a good, strong intuition and you're really comfortable trusting your intuition. I think you described at some point, like even your ex was at the doctor's trying to convince you to take this medication. Like, one, how did you convince yourself not to take that medication? And, how much was intuition involved in even that decision? And that's related, the medication related to the quote unquote traumatic brain injury.
Maybe that goes back to being aware of the overprescription of antibiotics. I think I have had this sense for a couple of decades that doctors overprescribe, that's a thing that happens, and that maybe not everything can be fixed with the drug. So that combined with the other doctor questioning,
It was pretty subtle, though. Right? It
Yeah,
was pretty
real,
subtle,
real
right?
subtle.
Like, because doctors don't tend to badmouth each other and
I
don't
do
like,
not.
hey, you might want to get 3 second opinions because he's the only one who prescribes this. That's
Right.
pretty subtle.
It was. It just didn't feel right. And my ex, he was like, you have to get better. I mean, just as an example, I created an email sequence in the company that in 4 weeks' time as a special project at one point that generated $1 million that year. Like, my brain was worth a lot of money.
It wasn't even, he didn't just want his wife back. He wanted like the great employee back.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, we all did, right? I mean,
Yeah.
she supported me too. She was somewhere else. I don't know where she went.
It's interesting because a lot of this, what you're doing is also brain taxing, right? So you're pushing through discomfort and fogginess and whatever to reach out and to understand these things and to trust your intuition. That's a pretty rough journey. All right, so talk about how that kind of ultimately resolves.
So once I got the mycotoxin test that Dave recommended from a local functional practitioner, by that time it's like late February and I'm ready. I will surrender to anybody who wants to prescribe anything. I'm so sick at that point because the mold started in my brain, but it went to the rest of my body and I was just exhausted. Like I couldn't stay awake past 7:00. And so she prescribed nystatin, which is an antifungal that isn't really recommended for mold. And that was so strong. She gave me such a strong dose that I had suicidal thoughts for the only 4 days of my life.
Wow.
And so I had to go to her and say, I can't take this drug. And she said, I told you you'd need mental health help to get through this process. And I said, no, that's not how this works. You don't give me a drug that causes me to think about killing myself and then I go talk to somebody about that. I'm not doing that. We're not taking this drug. And she said, well, then I can't help you. Like, what? I finally found a functional medicine doctor and she's telling me she can't help me. And so then I had to find another doctor. And so I think I looked on some mold boards at that point. She was recommended by my gynecologist and I just took the recommendation. So I found somebody who specialized in helping people recover from mold injuries. And he charged me $650 an hour. But it wasn't just that he was so much an hour. They told me before I could get into the office, I had to commit to $13,000 worth of testing to see him. And I paid $13,000 to see him, all paid by my first visit, half paid up front, half paid when I got there. Wow. I mean, it was really extreme. I was desperate.
Yeah.
And then he had to retest me for mold. The genetic test he didn't even analyze for me. There's a gene that if you have, it's hard for your body to get rid of mold. He never told me if I had it or not. I still don't know. I can't read the test results myself. I took another test from another company thinking it was going to be easier to understand. Didn't understand that either. I'm really smart. Like, I can't read this stuff. It doesn't make sense to me. And so I still don't know. Maybe I'm better off not knowing. You know, Chris Hemsworth did that whole Limitless series on National Geographic because he has ApoE4. And they said, oh, you're going to get early onset Alzheimer's. I was so mad when I heard that they told him that because he doesn't have to get Alzheimer's. We know that. Yeah. But then, and I'm sure someone has gotten to him. I've heard he's done regenerative medicine therapies in Panama. That's been featured on Instagram. So I'm sure he's gotten the better information. But these doctors, man, they can do more harm than good. And so the reason why I had to fire this second doctor, though, was not because of the money and not because he didn't help me, but because he broke the fundamental principle of what he told me I had to do to get better. He said I couldn't focus on my symptoms. He told me that the best thing I could do to heal was to not experience symptoms. and he recommended a training program, neuro-limbic rewiring program. And with this program, I would learn how to cut out my symptoms and not acknowledge them. So I took the program, and I'm going to tell your viewers right now exactly what to do. Save $300. If you experience a symptom, let's just say it's a massive headache. And for me, it was triggered by chemical smells, perfumes or household cleaners or things like that. Stomp your foot, throw out your hands, and say no.
And say no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Out loud.
Yep.
And so I did this, and it only took me a few days of doing that I could just say it in my head and I didn't have to look silly. And then I didn't have any more symptoms. And so when we bring attention to our symptoms, we're blocking our body's ability to do the work it has to do to heal the body. The body knows how to heal. So the big question that we have to ask ourselves as biohackers or as just humans walking on this earth, do I want to have my liver and kidneys filter what's in my air, food, water, etc.? Or do I want to have a Jasper air filter? Do I want to have a water filter? Do I want to eat organic foods? We can block a lot of toxins before they get to us. And so what we're doing also when we focus on our symptoms, that's like consuming a toxin. And so if I'm conscious of the pain in my hip, I'm directing all my attention to pain. And it's funny how if you I have this great structural therapist who took the pain out of my hip. And now every time I get a little tinge, I remember what it feels like to have no pain. Pain's gone.
Yeah.
Every time. And so we have to get out of our own way, because if we draw attention to pain, we create stress in the body, and stress in the body blocks healing. And so when I came back for a visit 2, he asked me about my symptoms. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he said, tell me about your symptoms. And I was like, I don't have anything to tell you. And he's like, well, surely you have something. And I was like, I did what you said.
You told me to get rid of them. They're
right.
gone.
I took you seriously. I'm sure maybe stuff was happening in my body, but I didn't put my attention there, and I'm not going to talk about it. And then he did that twice. And I was like, no, so then I had to just figure it out on my own.
And so then you start going, you're already down at this point, I wouldn't really call it biohacking. Did you call it biohacking? Or really just kind of solution hunting, and it kind of ended up dabbling in the biohacking world? Like how do you kind of resolve that? And then maybe let's throw in, functional medicine. Like, where would you start if somebody's going through some challenge?
I love to talk about the differences between biohacking and functional medicine, because I think that it's really important, especially for doctors today, to understand the difference. I was calling it biohacking. Once I heard that term, I loved it. I'm a computer nerd, and so it just really resonated with me. I guess not everybody else loves the term biohacking, but for me,
I'm surprised. I like it, yeah.
But I've had these glasses since then. So I bought the yellow glasses the moment I heard Dave Asprey talk about yellow glasses. I just love them. I fixed my sleep. I got the Aura Ring, fixed my sleep. I have red, amber, yellow, and I use them in sequence. So I can, if I'm really having sleep trouble, I'll start with a little red for like 5 minutes, 15 minutes, go to amber for half an hour, go to yellow for the bulk of the day, and then go back to amber, then red, and then I'll fix my circadian rhythm. But the Aura Ring ended up making me more stressed, so I had to give it up. Lots of people tell that story.
Maybe a challenge with being so data-driven.
Yeah. I just, for sure. I could obsess. So the question again was, when did I start calling it biohacking? When did I consider myself in that world?
Functional medicine, like how would you, which path would you send somebody down?
I think that some of the biohacks are so easy and clear, especially if you start with eliminating things. Confession, I didn't realize until last week that my shampoo from Whole Foods has phthalates in it. Until last week. Like, I have switched all my There's no plastic in my kitchen. Like, I've really gone to great lengths to remove toxins from my environment. And I just like, we have these old habits. Oh, if it's Whole Foods, it's fine, it's safe, everything's okay. And these shortcuts work to help us get to where we need to go. And then we have to examine all of our shortcuts too. But I believe that some things in biohacking, especially if you've eliminated toxins from your world, sometimes if you try something and it works, then you know that biohacking can help you get better. But if you have a root cause, then biohacking is not going to make you feel better. And so it might just be an inexpensive way to diagnose the situation, whether or not you need to dig in further. And you could probably go to a biohacking clinic and not spend a ton of money and try a few things. And if they don't work, then let's talk about some expensive tests. But if anybody's got like gut issues, get a gut test.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean,
or try the AIP, the autoimmune protocol, which is basically you eliminate down to just those things that are not inflammatory. Mm-hmm. And the list is longer than you would like. My first thought was like, oh, that's like 3 things. And no, it's actually a pretty good list. And then you start adding one thing at a time over 3, add it for 3 days and see what your response is. So that's like that's free. Like you just right. got to pay attention. It's, it takes effort, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So I have a friend who got diagnosed with colitis, and his doctor said, take some fiber and you'll, it'll be fine. It's the opposite advice that should be given to someone in that situation. And so I put him on a carnivore diet and got him a gut test. And so then he got to find out what was really wrong and fix it. And the doctors are not testing. They're like, oh, looks inflamed. We'll call it colitis. And it's just not fair to people who rely on our institutions of government and healthcare, academia. We rely on the expertise of our respected professionals. Regular people shouldn't be expected to question doctors.
Yeah.
It's absurd.
It is a little bit crazy. So what can real quickly I want to what do you feel really resolved kind of mold? It usually involves moving or removing, and then your own kind of process. And then I want to start talking about how events may have played out in this journey for you.
I did some gentle binders after everything else failed. Lots of chia seeds, chlorella, some aloe vera, really gentle things because I was not going to go through another Herx response. I wasn't going to do that. I moved, and that helped. I got a dog, and he's lovely. And so my doctor told me not to exercise, and I thought that was really dumb. But because my heart rate was going up with any activity, after I stopped, it was a really dangerous sign. I could get dizzy, I could hurt myself, whatever. But I got a dog and I walked him in the sunshine, so I got a lot more vitamin D. And I was doing manual lymphatic drainage massages at the time. And those are really helpful for eliminating toxins. And I did them before because I just liked them. But that's probably one of the things that kind of sustained me and kept me going while I was figuring out what was going on. But I kept that up. But then once I felt good enough to go to a sound bath. So we were coming out through COVID. It's still 21, so I guess we're not out of COVID yet. But the local yoga studio opened back up and started offering sound baths. And that's when I was introduced to a gong. And I knew that my toes I had peripheral neuropathy from the mold. And that first sound bath, I couldn't feel my toes. I couldn't feel the vibrations on my toes. And the second time I went, a week later, I could. And so I knew the gongs themselves were doing something. And in that frequency range of like 40 to 60 hertz, it penetrates through the body. And sound goes through matter. So those sound waves were going through my head and out. And so that was that was helping with lymphatic drainage. It was helping me to detox. But I think that really is what shook it out of my brain. And so very soon after that, I bought a gong, and I would just sit, like just tap it and just feel the waves, just like hours, because I was sick. I had nothing else to do but heal. And I think it's really one of the best things that helped me.
And I've seen you in a shirt that says Gong Vibes. Is there any data on gongs, or is this something that just intuitively you knew was right for you?
The data on gongs is not entirely scientific, but there is data on whole body vibration and sound and light in frequency ranges. And so if you extrapolate from the research done, so for instance, we know that light flashing at 40 hertz, 40 cycles a second, can, like near infrared light that penetrates the brain, flashing at that rate, drains cerebral spinal fluid. And that takes with it amyloid plaques and tau proteins.
Yep.
And so that's how they're reversing Alzheimer's with light, is that they're pulsing it at a frequency that they know is draining. And so they did that study in 2016 with light. And late last year, they published an update demonstrating that sound in that frequency can do the same thing.
Yeah, there was a Radio Lab podcast that talked about that, and it was fascinating. It's fascinating research. They had brain implants. They had a 90% reduction in amyloid plaques. They went to light, and I don't even think they were doing red light. They were doing just LED, regular LED light. Same 90%. And sound. I actually have a browser tab that automatically opens up every time I close and open my browser, which is at 40 hertz, because sound had like a 30% reduction in amyloid plaque. So yeah, no, that's really, really powerful stuff. During all of this, did you go to any events? Were they on your radar? Like, obviously you read Dave's books and probably knew about his conference. Did that even interest you at any point?
I didn't know it existed.
Wow.
And so when I was getting divorced, because before I talk about that, I wanted to say that because I was that spreadsheet girl with this analytical left brain dominance, when that went quiet, I changed. All I had left was presence. But it took me a long time to appreciate that. I called it buffering, where I would just get stuck and be like, oh, how long was I standing here? And have no idea. But then when I recognized that, when I would take a shower, I would come to and go, how long have I been here? Then I was able to kind of explore those moments in the moment, and my life became present, completely present. And so I couldn't go back to that. I think the Orlando Weekly said about me, about the documentary made about us.
Yep.
A whirling dervish of OCD and profanity.
I wish I had found that. I would have opened with that.
And so that was the old me. And the new me, if I were to become judgmental, I would go back to the old me. There's no judgment in presence. There's no past, there's no future. It's really hard to get shit done sometimes, but it's a way of life for me that I'm not willing to give up. It's just changed everything about me. So that does not generally sustain a marriage when two people who were the same become so completely different. And his world was too stressful for me, and that kind of stress was not conducive to my continued healing. And now we are better friends and support each other in wonderful ways. And what he does doesn't affect me. And I'm happy for him. He can take all the risks he wants, and that's on him. And I don't have to worry. And I get to just be a friend. Friends are totally supportive like that. Spouses, that's harder, right? Because it's personal. And so we were with a lawyer as we were divorcing. And the lawyer asked him how I was different before and after the mold. And he said, well, she used to be a real boss bitch. And now she sits in the corner and plays gongs. And I was like, oy, oy,
Hey,
oy,
is that the most flattering description you've ever received?
Yeah. And so I called him that night and I said, that's not who I am. I don't know what to do. Because I was forming at that time a metaphysical event with like artists and crystals and psychics. And I was just really caught up in this world. And I was like, that's not really truly who I am. He said, why do you like gongs so much? I said, well, they're biohacking. He goes, what do you mean they're biohacking? And I explained the science of sound like we just talked about. And he said, well, then do that. I said, what do you mean do that? Do biohacking. What do you mean? Do a biohacking event. Like he's spelling it out for me, hitting me over the head with it. And I'm like, can I do that? He goes, I don't know. So I got off the phone, looked it up, found a couple biohacking events, created a website, had a brand within 2 weeks. 2 months later, I went to my first biohacking event, and here we are.
That's awesome. All right. So why do you wish, two questions here. Do you wish you had access and had attended any biohacking events like when you were going through your journey? And why would you suggest somebody who may be on a journey, maybe just looking for, health as they get older, why should they attend an event?
I mean, the reason why they should attend is the reason I wish I would have known about one and gone to it. But it was during COVID when I was going through this, and so there were no events. So even Dave Asprey's event, I think they took some time off that year. And I certainly wasn't flying to LA if that's where they had it in 21, late 21.
I think it was virtual. There was definitely 1 year it was virtual, and I think I signed up and watched like 1 hour of something, and then that was it.
Yeah, if I had found it, I wouldn't have been able to go. There had been an event, but I don't think there were events when I was sick. So the reason why I created the event the way that I created it was because I wasted so much money on shit that didn't work. And great stuff that didn't work. Hyperbaric's awesome, didn't work. V-Light's awesome, didn't work. Right? So this goes back to biohacking versus functional medicine. At some point, you have to be able to get to the root of what the issue is in order to heal. And if I could have done all of the supplements and all of the detox and all of the things. And if we never found the mold, I would still be sick. If you don't find the root cause, none of it works. It's just a Band-Aid. It's just symptom management. Like we're treating women with perimenopause with symptom management with hormones. When the reality is that our hormones, as they decline, stop masking over the inflammation that we're building in our bodies. So if we're eating crap, stressed out, overwhelmed, the body's inflamed, but all those fertility hormones make us less in pain. They protect us from the brain fog. They protect us from things. We're like superhuman before perimenopause. And then that time comes in, that protective layer starts to decrease. It's not a disease. We don't have a problem. If you give estrogen, women will feel better. But the problem was the fish and chips I was eating. God, did I love fish and chips and fried chicken and oatmeal.
It's delicious.
Love it. Cupcakes. Freaking love cupcakes. And so we have to know what's causing it. And so I would have been misdiagnosed with perimenopause had I seen my gynecologist right away, right? Like I presented with all the symptoms of perimenopause. If you don't find the trigger, if you don't find the real problem, if you have one, like maybe some people really are just stressed out and need a nervous system reboot, sound therapy might be great for that, and then go right back. But if you're not bouncing back in a week, let's dig in a little further. And so I set up the event so people could explore these modalities in person without relying on online testimonials. And if I had had that, I wouldn't have spent nearly what I spent.
So by going to your event, you're probably saving money. What is one or two speakers that you would highlight to also entice people to go?
Well, we're going to have some fun. So we've got JP Sears hosting the main stage, and
He's fun.
He is fun, and he's a really great guy. People who don't like his comedy think he's a piece of shit. He's great. He's so smart and so interested in health. He's going to be awesome at the show. I really want people to understand that biohacking is kind of a covert industry. You know, when we talk about what the products can do, we say it may help you feel better. It may reduce pain. It may support your overall immunity. It sounds so wishy-washy. So we're going to have Andrew Bustamante talk about, he's the everyday spy guy. He's going to talk about what it's like to be on the inside, right? Like we can talk about C60, but only so far.
Yeah.
You kind of have to talk around it. You can reference studies. You can talk about, you have to go at it from all the weird angles. You can't just say C60 lowers inflammation and reduces, you can't say it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I don't even want to finish the sentence. If I say it, you're going to get flagged and taken off of YouTube. You can't say it. And so what we have to do is find a way to communicate with the people supplying novel solutions in a way that we understand the nature of the conversation. Because we can't say it, not because it's not been demonstrated, but because the government literally blocks this form of speech.
Yeah.
And they'll send you a warning letter.
Yeah.
It's happened to so many friends of mine. And so not only can you try things for yourself, but you'll get some tips on how to think about being healthy, some novel solutions, anything from ozone to peptides to oxygen to, just everything under the sun. So there's all sorts of educational sessions. You won't be able to sit through everything, so you'll get the recordings so you can watch them later. But the most important part is walking through the room and trying the hydrogen therapy or trying the brain tap or trying, there's so many techniques. There's a flashing light, the psychedelic cool thing like Roxiva. It's awesome. There's so many techniques and every single person's different and every situation is unique. So if I could have done that, maybe I would have walked away with the Healy right away and not bought a light helmet and a chamber. The Healy helped me to detox. And
Very
so
cool.
I just want people to figure out that it's approachable. It's not hard. Everybody in the room has been through something. Everybody's overcome some sort of pain point. It's not a bunch of tech bros. It's not a bunch of fitness jocks. It's regular people like you and me who stumbled in our health at one point and figured out we had to do something. It's a really cool group of people. Yeah, no, it's exciting every time I go. And like I said, yours was the first event I ever went. It wasn't really on my radar, and now it is. And I go to lots of events, and I'm really excited about kind of attending your event. When is it? February 28th and March 1st in Miami.
And then what's the best link that the audience could go to? And we'll give this out again because I have a couple wrap-up questions.
Biohackerexpo.com.
Biohackerexpo.com. All right, so here are our wrap-up questions. Sandy, do you have a target age that you want to live to?
I've always thought from the time I was a little girl that I would live to be 108, so I just assume it's going to happen.
108. Mm-hmm. And how long do you think humans can live?
With the science we have now, I'm going to be real controversial right now. With the science we have today, I don't believe there's anything on the market that extends our lives beyond 120. 120, 130, whatever the oldest person has been.
120, I think it's 122, Jean Clement. Yeah.
Okay. I don't think we've shifted the curve yet. I think there's a lot of snake oil on the market and people making wild claims. And I think that since the average lifespan is somewhere in the 80s, getting back to living to 120, that's what we're doing now. that's where these technologies are leading us. I believe that it's possible to be healthy over 100, but only if we do these things. The idea that we can live to be 180 based on today's technologies and today's supplements, like today's supplements are more likely to cause kidney failure than to make you live to 180. When you take them by the gobsful, that's not healthy. What's healthy is ordering the body so the body can do its own thing. These people, these centenarians all over the world, they aren't popping supplements every day. They aren't doing what the gurus are suggesting we have to do to live to 180. It's not like that. We have to get back to what's pure about life, DNA, energy. This is how we get to 120. Do I believe that the technology will come that will get us to 180? I think it's possible. I think in my lifetime, it's possible something shows up, something shifts the curve. Like, I think antibiotics were the first biohack because they doubled our lifespan. So will something happen in the next 10 years that can double our lifespan? I think it's possible.
Very cool. What are 2 to 3 protocols, habits, mindsets, let's call them shortcuts because everybody likes shortcuts, to longevity and a long health span that you would share?
Chanting. I chant for 3 minutes. I time it on my Apple Watch with the meditation timer, and then it records it and records my HRV. So HRV is one of the leading indicators of longevity. And if you have really great HRV, the chances you're going to live longer are much, much higher. My HRV is in the toilet. So I walk around with an HRV of about 30 throughout the day. And for my age, it should be 50 to 60 just without any effort. And so when I chant for 3 minutes, breathe in for 6 seconds and Om out for 6 seconds for 3 minutes, a couple times a day, whenever I do that, my HRV goes immediately from 30 to like 70. And if I do it for 12 minutes, I can get it over 100. But that kind of a shift is the most powerful thing you can do for yourself in any day. Outside of getting sunlight, I think putting your feet on the earth, maybe those are the 3 things that, gosh, we have to embrace the natural rhythms of our bodies.
Excellent. So we've got chant, sunlight, and grounding. When
I say grounding, I literally mean grounding. I mean exchanging with the earth. I don't mean a mat. I don't believe in that.
Yeah.
Not to knock them, but I see all these people taking in the electricity off of a laptop keyboard, huge EMFs, and then running it straight through their body and out their feet because their feet are grounded underneath their desk. I'm not doing that. Yeah. That sounds awful.
Yeah. That sounds like a bad plan.
Yeah. Let's go outside.
What are 1 to 2 things people get absolutely wrong regarding longevity and a long health span?
I think there are 2 things. I think the aging clocks are smoke and mirrors, biological aging clocks. I think the information they provide is interesting, and I think the calculating a rate of aging is just a mathematical formula, and I don't put much stock in it. It's interesting from a comparative perspective, but not in the long run. And then I think the most wrong thing right now is anyone who says, this is how you live longer. Nobody's lived longer yet.
Yeah.
Nobody's broken the barrier. And all the people doing it are in their 40s and 50s. Like, we don't know. So anyone who says they know, it's bullshit.
Absolutely.
We don't know.
All right, Sandy, just how can people contact you? Give the website again, and maybe some IG and other ways that they might be able to reach out to you.
Yeah, it's biohackerexpo.com, or on social media, it's at Biohacker Expo.
And you've got a deal on the website right now, right?
Yes, it's 40% off, but why don't we get you a code set up with My Vital C or something? And then you can put it in the show notes, and we'll get you set up to give your audience 50% off.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. So 50% off if you use the code MyVitalC. Any IG you would like them to follow? Is it the same Biohacker Expo?
Biohacker Expo.
Excellent. Mm-hmm. And Sandy, what in the near future are you excited about?
I'm really looking forward to taking my event manager, Sarah, to New York City right after the event to plan the next event.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah,
Excellent.
we're going to sit in coffee houses and just create the next plan.
Excellent. So you can find her at biohackerexpo.com. You can get a 50% discount on attendance. The event is February 28th, March 1st. We are in 2025. Maybe you're listening to this a long time from now. And biohackerexpo.com is how you reach her. Sandy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Chris. It's my pleasure.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Live Beyond the Norms podcast. Make sure to subscribe and follow. Also, make sure not to be that guy, the guy sharing this podcast with people who are not interested in living beyond the norms. If you would like to learn more about the ESS60 molecule, the molecule responsible for the single longest longevity experimental result on mammals in history, a full 90% extension of life, visit myvitalc.com. That's myvitalc as in carbon.com.